So, hi. Yeah, I'll tell you about AtlasBoard, which is a very flexible and powerful sort of framework to build wallboards. Yeah. So, possible applications is basically anything that you would want to do with a wallboard works with AtlasBoard. So you can do project monitoring, following streams, monitoring like build status or server statuses, that kind of thing. But you can also integrate calendars or more, say, complicated monitoring products like Google DoubleClick for advertisers. Yeah, so anything with a REST API is extremely easy to integrate. Everything else online can also be integrated. It's just a little bit harder, but yeah. So now, what does AtlasBoard do for me? It gives me a framework into which I can, or where I can write jobs and widgets which then appear on my wallboard. Now, the cool thing or the clever thing about it is that it makes that it is structured in such a way that it allows you to program very reusable code and makes it very flexible, and it also makes sure that the widgets don't interfere with each other. So there's no way I can do something in here which then sort of kills all the others. And yeah. Now it uses Node.js on the server, that's why I'm here. And on the client side, we've got the usual HTML, CSS, and plain old JavaScript. Yeah. Now, as the name suggests, it's produced or was written by Atlassian, but it's completely independent of other Atlassian products, and it's free. So, yeah. So how does it work? We've got basically three components. The first is the jobs on the server, which are in Node.js. And these get the data from somewhere else in the internet and can do sort of some processing with it, and then supply data to the widgets which run on the client side in the browser. And then the third component is what's called the dashboard, which basically configures the whole appearance of the dashboard and also allows for the configuration of the job. So that's where I would save like user passwords or URL addresses and so on, which are then used by the jobs. Okay, so let's just jump into it. How would a dashboard configuration look like? So it's in JSON, as you can see, and the first part of it is defining the layout. So we sort of see, well, we have for each widget we have this sort of code block where we say in which row of the dashboard should this widget appear, in which column, how wide should it be, how tall, and so on. And yeah, sort of the only limitation of AtlasBoard is that it limits you to 4x6 tiles on the dashboard, so you can't do all shapes of widgets, but I think 24 tiles is enough. Yeah, and then you also specify obviously which widget should run in this place, then which job belongs to the widget, so the data from which job should be used in this widget, and also the configuration file, which is the next part of the JSON file down here, where we can set all kinds of parameters, and this config object is then passed to the server object, who can then read all kinds of things and then pass it on to the widget. So in your JavaScript components, you don't have to do any hard coding, because all the parameters and everything which you would reasonably want to change, you can just put into the configuration. So if you want to say change the server you're interested in, then you just change the address here and don't have to go into the JavaScript files and just leave that. Or if you want a different query, say, then you just change something in there. So it makes it really easy to do flexible code, and you can just and it's very easy to change sort of the what you're looking at. So now for the client side, the HTML is just usual HTML, and you're just writing HTML for this specific widget, so you don't need to do any head or body parts, etc. And the clever thing of AtlasBoard is that it takes the HTML you've written for that widget and wraps it in a list item element, which it then later positions on the screen. So you don't need to do any of the layout stuff, it's all done for you. And then in the CSS file, you just write as you usually would. And then AtlasBoard adds an additional selector to your CSS for the widget list item element. So the CSS you write is only active inside that widget. So you can't interact with anybody else. The JavaScript file must contain a widget object with a method onData, which is obviously, as the name suggests, called when the data arrives. And onData is called with the widget element, so the list item we talked about earlier. So then in your JavaScript, you can do all the jQuery selectors and so on with respect, or with the context of this, in the context of this list item element, so then you don't interfere with anybody else. You can just do your, Okay, so this is what a widget example would look like. So we have the onData method, and inside we call always in the context of the wrapping element. Also very nice, they also provide like an onError event, which you can then use to show an error message to the user. Now sort of the interesting part, I guess, the jobs, which obviously we have to have, we have the few quirks or characteristics of Node. And the job, as I mentioned before, is called with this config object, which carries all the parameters. It's also called with dependencies, so it's several standard modules. Obviously, you can include whatever you like here. And interestingly, or sort of quite useful, it has its own logger, which logs from the client side and the server side into one central log, so you can sort of see where things go wrong. It's all very centralized. And then there's the callback function, which is called when the job is completed and returns the result. So this is sort of what a minimalistic program would look like. Just do something and return. Well, you don't do anything, you just return stuff from the configuration. And yeah. Okay, so what I've tested it with so far is Jira and Confluence. It also works with Jenkins. It's very easy to take calendars in the ICS format. Also, Atlassian has widgets and jobs for their own products, obviously, so it's easy to use them. And for any web application where there is a Node.js library, it's also extremely easy to integrate these because you just use the library and the library handles all the other interactions. And when preparing for this talk, I noticed that Meetup has a REST API, so I thought I'd quickly show you how to program a job which shows the development of attendees at MNUG user group, at MNUG meetings. So to see if the group is growing or maybe in decline, or I don't know. So let's have a look. Where is my mouse? There's my mouse. There we go. Okay, so to do that, it's a bit small. 1 second. Font. Oh, text font. Let's just go big. Okay. Now let's have a look. Okay, so so what we need to do is create a new folder with the name of the job we want. So let's call it, I don't know, MNUG. Okay, and then in that folder we need MNUG.js. So now we'll program the job. So as usual, we need to, well, as every Node module, we start, and then we know this function is called with the configuration file, the dependencies, and the job callback function. Callback. There we go. And okay, so what we want to do, well, it's just so we want to call a specific URL, which we got from the from Meetup, which I already looked up earlier, so I know it, but to demonstrate how you would do it in a reusable way, you would just take it from the configuration file. So you would do config.url, and then because Meetup doesn't like, well, you need to have an account and so on, so you have an access key, so we'll also take that from the configuration file. Okay, so that's that. Then what we want to do is request the data from this URL. So we call one of our dependencies, namely request, which we know to be there with the options we specified above and the callback function, which is called with these parameters in. Okay, so now we have the, well, we get the data, which is just a string, and we know it's going to be a JSON object. So we got to parse the JSON, parse the data into JSON format. And then what we're going to do is, well, from the data, actually I can quickly, let's have a look at the data for parsed events. Okay. I'll accept the risks. Okay. Maybe let's try a different browser. Okay. Seems going kind of dangerous. Okay, well, let's just hope it works in the program later. Okay, so, well, the data has a field, is an array of for each event, and each event has the field, I think, number of people who replied with, well, who replied they would attend. So, so what we're going to do is well, have an array into which we write the number of attendees at the different meetings with the date of the meeting, and then hope it works. Yeah, so, well, so we'll iterate over the results. And Okay, yeah, and well, because there was, I think, one, like, just a coding event or just a workshop where obviously there were only very few attendees, so for the beauty of the graph, we'll exclude that one. So we want to check, well, we only want to have the events which which contain user group meeting, so we just do a quick, yeah. These are sort of the real things. If that's greater than 0, yeah, that should work. Yeah, then what we want to do is just push to our, oops. Okay, and now because, well, I already, for a different problem, I programmed a widget which just takes an array and turns it into a chart. So it's completely independent of this project, but because it's sort of very flexible, I can just use it with this job as well. So I sort of know I have to have a certain format, and so that's why this looks the way it looks. Second. Okay, so the time when it happens, they want it. I want it in seconds, and then I want the response data results. Okay. Okay, now this field is called yes RSVP count, obviously. Okay, and okay, so now I've got all the results. I want to push this. Well, this is sort of because I know what the format I want to have at the end, so I need to do some attendees, I believe. Attendees, yeah. And I can also say the color I want, so let's just go with green. Okay, hope that looks good on the graph. Okay, and then, oops, and here, 1 second. So almost done. So I'll just pass on stuff from, oops, sort of configuration from my config file. I'll have 3 things here. Start type. I want a y-axis. Okay, and then finally, I'll call my callback function with no error and the output. Okay. Now all we have to do is go to the wallboard where I've already added some other stuff. Just well, but we'll also add our stuff. Okay, so I know there's a spot available in this column, and I want to use the chart widget, which I created for something else. I want to use the MNUG job, which we just created, and the MNUG config, which I'll create in a second. And down here, we'll create the MNUG configuration, which consists of okay, I think I'm sort of rushing a bit in time, so I'll just quickly copy what it needs to be. There we go. And oops, this looks like a few too many brackets. Let's try this. Yep, okay. And now all we have to do is, hopefully, call AtlasBoard start and the port on which we want it to run. And okay, the clock worked. Okay, let's just call it localhost. Okay, MNUG dashboard. Okay, so we've got the clock. Okay, so apparently I don't have an internet connection. I had one earlier. Let's just quickly check that.
Try to go to some HTTP site without HTTPS.
Ah, okay, maybe it triggers. Ah, there we go. Okay. It says it's valid for 4 hours, but I didn't realize I talked that long. Complicated password. QJ. Submit. Succeeded. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay, just whoops. Okay, next try. Okay, there was a little error, but okay. So we've got public holidays, which is always important. Okay, the clock works. Now, so the chart should appear up here. Okay, here's sort of what Google page speed gives us for the MNUG website. So there's a lot of images, which is always nice. Okay, but the chart is obviously taking some time. Output. Yeah, okay. Output. Ah, okay, so let's just create our output. Try again. Huh? Oh yeah, right. True. Okay. Let's try again. Okay, this looks a bit better. Oh, come on. Okay, I'll just copy the my working configuration, and then okay, copy, command all, command paste, and check. So let's try this. Cancel this one. Try again.
So it's not possible to configure on the fly? Sorry, just a question.
It is for the, well, it's possible, but he sort of only refires the jobs after a given amount of time. Yay! So yay. So the user group is growing. There was a long dry period in the summer. But yeah, and I think today's meetup is even a tiny bit higher than the last one. So yeah.
AtlasBoard.
AtlasBoard, yeah. Any questions? And thank you very much for listening.